if you think about the challenge of what the home test kit is trying to solve, it's dealing with the stigma of HIV testing and allowing people to be able to test at home. And so one way you can think about the solution to this problem is a technological solution. Well, hey, there's a home test kit that people can use. Problem solved. But obviously, there's a design challenge and not just a technology challenge involved there. And so the design challenge is to take that technology, the home test kit, which is designed for a clinical setting in the United States to be used by trained clinical professionals. And how do we translate that into something that can be used by regular people in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa?
So when we started working on this project, some work had already been in San Francisco, some work had already been done in New York, particularly around packaging forms and functions. So we took that on board and then in many ways kind of like took a step back and thought again about sort of what would the overall experience be, what would the equivalent of the customer journey be for somebody who was about to go through this test, what would their mindset be, what would the sort of, what is the role of discretion in this, how would they want to hold this object, where would they want to take it, how would they want to use it, and how would they dispose of it. And from then we started to actually come up with constructs, packaging that we could sort of work with.
This is an early wireframe for the outside of the package. So this would be the front, this would be the back, and this is the part that's folded up in the middle. And what it does is it just lays out at a really high level what the content should be in there. So the visual designer has a starting point. They know, okay, I'm going to need an image. This is roughly the text that I'm going to need to put on there. And it gives them a place to start. It also allows us to review this with the client and with everyone who's interested in it. So before we spend all of the time to actually do the visual design, we can agree on what the content is, make some changes to this, because this is really quick to change, before we actually go in and do visual design, which then becomes much more time-consuming to change the details of that. And this is a wireframe for the pamphlet that comes inside. So it's just a first pass of the content and a way to get the visual designers started.
I thought a lot about, if people are doing this test privately at home, how does this package disintegrate into the environment afterwards? Does it literally disintegrate, or does it turn into different things? Instead of just a package, it could become a poster or that sort of thing. And we had a lot of direction from New York on this also. So the skin of the package is sort of a coiled up, reasonably sized poster that after someone tests, they could put it up on their wall or give it to their friend. And that skin of the package, the label of it, actually becomes something that has another life after just containing all these parts. The end caps, the sort of boat shapes on either end, those could be made from like an egg carton paper pulp material. So those, if they ended up out in the street, they could just slowly disintegrate. Or maybe, and this is sort of my own personal thing, I thought, this shape that we ended up with is very boat-like. So if a kid was to find them, then it's something, it turns into sort of a toy, which would be sort of a happy afterthought. Oh, what if it does end up in the hands of a kid in a way that kind of links back to, well, what is this from? And then it sort of changes people's thoughts and perceptions about being tested for HIV.
Once we had gotten through the initial form, the function, and how this thing would behave in a sense, then we could start with the graphic design, the sort of outer layer of that. At which point it became an exercise around sort of how we could create a sort of very simplistic step-through process, analogous in many ways to airline safety manuals and things like that, where you're really taking the user through a series of simple steps to achieve a specific goal. This is a relatively complex goal in the sense of kind of what a positive test means, what a negative test means, and the different steps that you have to go through to get to it. I was working to get to a system where words could disappear in a sense, so typefaces and things like that would not become an issue. I would be dealing with symbology, colors, patterns, and so on to help tell the story. So commonly understood vernaculars such as green and red that were cross-cultural. numerical systems 1 through 9, arrows and things of that nature that would allow me to, as well as iconography of the packet itself, so kind of a see-say kind of a thing, would allow me to sort of translate that story. Ideally, I was working towards a system where I could create this sort of the same visual language and apply that, whether you were English language speaker, you spoke Zulu, whether you spoke Spanish, whatever your language was, that it would work the same way.